the hunger and the punishment. The two alien children sat close together in the corner of a broken hut. Their stomachs growled like wild animals. They had not eaten since the morning, and the smell of food from the kitchen made their small bodies shake with need. Their stepfather had locked the storage, but hunger was stronger than fear. One child whispered to the other, "If we take just a little, he will not know." The younger one crept quietly to the corner where the bread was kept. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a small piece. The older sister grabbed a fruit. They ran back to the dark corner and ate quickly, stuffing the food into their mouths before anyone could see. For a short moment, the taste of bread felt like heaven, their lips wet with juice from the fruit. They forgot the pain of hunger, they forgot the cold of the night. But the door slammed open, and their stepfather's heavy steps shook the ground. His eyes burned with anger as he saw the half-eaten bread and fruit. His voice thundered across the hut. "Thieves, you dare steal from me!" The children froze. The bread slipped from their small hands. They shook with fear, their tiny hearts beating faster than drums. He pulled them up by their arms, his grip cruel and hard. "You eat too much, you bring nothing but trouble," he shouted, his face close, his breath heavy with rage. The older child tried to explain. "We were hungry," but his slap silenced her. The younger one cried, but no sound escaped. Only tears rolled down her dirt-covered cheeks. The stepfather dragged them outside into the cold night. The ruined street stretched before them, broken walls, dust, and shadows. The smell of smoke hung in the air. "You are not my children. You are a curse," he growled. Without another word, he pushed them away and slammed the door shut. The echo of the lock was like a hammer on their hearts. The children stood in the dark alley, their small hands clutched together. The younger whispered, "Why does he hate us so much?" The older one said nothing, her lips trembling. The night was silent except for the sound of their own breath. Their stomachs hurt again, emptiness heavier than stones inside them. They walked slowly through the ruins. Their bare feet touched the cold ground. Every corner seemed dangerous, every shadow looked like a monster. The older one whispered, "We must find food. We must not stop." But inside her heart, she wondered if they would even live till morning. They passed broken stalls where once people sold fruits. The tables were empty. Dust lay thick. Only rats searched for scraps. The younger one bent down to pick a rotten piece of vegetable, but it was too spoiled to eat. She cried softly, "I cannot." The older one hugged her sister tightly. "Do not cry. I will find something." But her own eyes were full of tears. The wind howled between the ruins, carrying the smell of ashes. They remembered their mother, gone long ago, and the promises she once made. "I will always protect you." But now there was only silence. Their stepfather's words echoed in their ears. "You eat too much. You are not mine." The words cut deeper than hunger. Hours passed as they wandered, their small bodies weak, their lips dry. The younger stumbled and fell to the ground. Her knees scraped. She sobbed, "I want to go home." The older one knelt beside her, her voice breaking. "We have no home." In the distance, a dim light flickered. It was from a small fire burning in the ruins. They moved slowly toward it, their bodies tired but their eyes searching for hope. The younger whispered, "Maybe someone will give us food." But both of them knew most people would not care. Most people would turn away. They sat near the fire, not too close, just enough to feel a little warmth, their arms wrapped around each other. The older sister stroked the younger's hair and whispered, "We must stay strong." But inside, fear grew deeper. What if no one came? What if the night swallowed them forever? The younger asked in a trembling voice, "Do you think anyone will love us? Do you think anyone will call us theirs?" The older one looked at the stars hidden behind smoke, her voice soft. Maybe one day." The flames cracked. Shadows moved on the ruined walls. The two children closed their eyes, wishing for a miracle, wishing for someone to see them not as a burden, but as children who only wanted to live. The night stretched long, their small bodies pressed together for warmth, hunger still biting but hope refusing to die completely. Somewhere deep inside, they believed the universe had not forgotten them, and that soon someone different would appear, someone who would Not leave them for eating too much, but hold them for who they were. For now, all they had was each other. And the wish that tomorrow would bring a real father, not by blood, but by heart. The cold morning came slowly. Gray light touched the broken roofs above the children, their eyes opened to the same hunger, the same silence. They were still in the same ruined street, still alone. Dust covered their faces, their arms held each other like armor. The older sister sat up and looked around, but the fire had burned out, and no footsteps came near. She touched her sister's cheek gently. "Wake up. We need to move." Her voice was soft but firm. The younger girl blinked, her lips dry. "Did he come back?" she asked. The older one shook her head. "No, and he won't." The two girls stood up, their legs weak, their clothes full of holes and dirt. A cold wind blew through the ruins, making them shiver, but they had to keep walking. They had to find something, anything. Every step was heavy. The streets were dead. Walls were broken, windows shattered. The town once full of life was now silent. Only the cries of birds and the rustling of rats filled the air. They walked past a burned building where children used to play. Now there were only bones of toys, and ash. The younger girl pointed at a small stuffed animal buried in the rubble. "That used to be mine," she whispered. Her sister looked at it, then took her hand. "Come on, we can't stop here." They turned onto another road, this one even more broken. Rocks and metal pieces were scattered. A broken sign read Market Lane, but all the shops were gone, shelves empty, doors kicked in. The older sister searched the floor, hoping to find a leftover can or fruit, but there was nothing, only rust and dust. They passed a drinking fountain. Dry and cracked, the younger girl leaned over it anyway, hoping for a drop, but it gave nothing. She bit her lip to stop herself from crying. "Maybe in the next place," her sister said, though she didn't believe it herself. They heard a noise behind a wall. A quick shuffle. Both girls froze, hiding beside a pile of bricks. Their hearts thumped fast. Then a creature jumped out. A street scavenger, tall, thin, with gray skin and sharp teeth. It looked at them and hissed, but it didn't attack, just sniffed the air and ran away into another alley. The younger girl whispered, "Why is everything scary?" Her sister replied, "Because no one cares what happens here." They continued walking, slower now. Their feet hurt. The younger girl had cuts on her ankle. Her sister tore a piece of cloth from her own sleeve to wrap it. They didn't speak much, saving energy. Their eyes scanned every corner, every box, every bin. But the town had been picked clean long ago. They reached an old food station. It still had its sign, faded letters that read "Meals for All," but the door was hanging loose. The inside smelled like rot. They stepped in carefully, their stomachs tight with hope. Inside, they found old tables and chairs, dust covering everything and broken machines. But near the back wall, the younger girl spotted something. "A wrapper," she said, rushing to it. Her sister joined her, and together they opened the package. Inside were 3 small dried food bars. It wasn't much, but it was treasure to them. They sat on the floor, backs against the wall, and shared the bars slowly, biting carefully, letting every small piece sit in their mouths like magic. When they finished, the younger girl smiled for the first time in days. "That was the best thing ever." The older one nodded, her voice quiet. "We'll find more," though she wasn't sure if they would. Just then they heard movement again outside the broken door, the sound of boots, heavy and slow. They held their breath, afraid. It was their stepfather, or worse, one of the street gangs who took abandoned children for bad things. The older sister quickly pulled her younger sibling into the shadows behind the counter. They peeked through a crack, their hands clutched tightly. A figure stepped in, not alien, not gang, it was a human. Tall, covered in a long brown coat, a bag slung over his shoulder. He looked around quietly, not aggressive, not angry. The children didn't move, didn't make a sound. He walked to the food machines, touched one, then sighed, his voice low. "Still broken?" He turned toward the back wall, coming closer, to where they hid. The older sister pulled her sibling tighter, ready to run if needed. But then the human did something strange. He opened his bag and took out 2 fresh food bars and placed them gently on the counter. Then he turned and walked out, saying to himself, "If someone finds them, let it help." The girls stayed frozen for a full minute. Then slowly, the older one stood, looked around, and reached for the food. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from confusion. "Why did he leave food?" the younger girl asked. The older one whispered, "I don't know. Maybe not everyone is cruel." They sat again, silent, eating slowly. The warmth from the food was more than just physical. It felt like hope, small, soft, but real. As the sky turned orange with evening light, the older sister looked toward the street. "He was human," she said. The younger girl asked, "Do you think he'll come back?" Her sister didn't answer, but her heart whispered yes. Maybe in the ruins of this broken town, something good had just begun. The next morning came with a soft orange light spilling. Through the broken glass windows, the sisters sat inside the empty food station, their backs still against the wall. They had not moved much during the night. The food bars given by the stranger had been their first real meal in days. Their stomachs still felt light, but their hearts felt something different, something like peace. The older sister kept glancing toward the entrance, her mind replaying the moment when the human had walked in, left the food, and walked out again. He didn't shout, he didn't hit, he didn't even ask questions. He had just helped. "Do you think he'll come again?" the younger one asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," the older one replied, "but if he does, we must not be seen. Not yet." They waited as morning passed slowly, but the human didn't come. Instead, loud voices echoed from outside. The girls peeked through a crack in the wall. A group of street thugs were walking by, aliens with sharp eyes, ragged clothes, and cruel smiles. One of them shouted, "If we find any rats hiding food, they'll wish they were never born." The girls crouched lower, their small bodies shaking. The food station suddenly didn't feel so safe anymore. When the sounds faded, they decided to leave. They moved carefully through the alleys, holding hands, stepping only when it was safe. The older one whispered, "We must find him. The human. He might help us." They searched for signs, footprints, anything that looked like someone had passed recently. They had no idea where he had gone, but they remembered the direction he came from. As they walked, the town grew even more ruined. Buildings leaned sideways, cables hung like dead vines. Hope began to fade again. Then they heard a soft humming, not from a machine, but a voice. A low, calm tune. Human. The sisters followed the sound carefully, their bare feet making no noise on the cracked ground around the corner. They saw him. The human knelt beside a broken water pipe, trying to fix it with a small toolkit. His coat was dusty, but his movements were slow and focused. The older girl pulled her sister behind a wall and watched him silently. "What is he doing?" the younger one whispered. "Maybe fixing it. For others," the older replied, surprised. Then, as if he felt their eyes, the human turned his head slightly. He didn't look surprised or afraid. He just smiled gently. "You can come out," he said softly, not loud, not commanding, just calm. "I saw you yesterday." The girls didn't move. He stood up slowly, placed his tools down, and reached into his bag. He pulled out 2 small wrapped food packets and laid them on a stone nearby. "I won't hurt you," he said, backing away from the food. Then he sat down on the ground, cross-legged, and waited. Minutes passed. The girls didn't move. Then the younger one tugged her sister's hand. "I want to go." Her sister looked into her eyes, saw the hunger and the hope, and finally nodded. They stepped out slowly, their eyes fixed on the man. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just watched quietly. The girls reached the food, picked it up, and held it close. "Thank you," the younger one whispered, her voice shaky. The man gave a small smile. "You're welcome," What do you want from us? The older sister asked, her voice cold, not trusting. The man shook his head. Nothing. The girls stared at him, confused. No one gave anything without a price, not in this world. He looked at them and said, "My name is Jalen. I travel through towns. I fix what I can, and if I find someone hungry, I share." He paused, then asked gently, "What are your names?" The older sister stayed silent, but the younger one stepped forward. "I'm Linny, and she's Alira." Jalen smiled. "Those are strong names." Alira narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care?" Jalen took a breath. "Because someone once cared for me when I was left behind too." The girls didn't know what to say. Jalen stood and picked up his tools. "If you want, there's an old shelter nearby. I cleaned it. There's blankets and water. I'll leave." The door open. "If you come, you come." He gave a small wave and walked away. He didn't ask them to follow. He didn't look back. Linny looked up at her sister. "Do we trust him?" Alira stared at the space where the human had stood. Her heart torn. "We don't have much choice," she said quietly. That night, as stars began to fill the sky, the two sisters stood outside the shelter Jalen had mentioned. It was small, dusty, but not broken. Inside were 2 folded blankets, a working water line, and a fire pit with warm coals still glowing. A small note lay on the floor beside a wrapped food pack. "You are safe here," it said, in careful, simple writing. Linny picked it up and hugged it close. "He really means it." Alira didn't reply, but her eyes softened. For the first time in forever, the girls curled up under blankets that didn't smell like fear. And outside, not far away, Jalen sat by his own camp watching the stars. A quiet smile on his face, as if he knew that he had just taken his first step toward becoming more than a stranger. The girls woke to a strange feeling, warmth. Linny blinked slowly, her small fingers curled around the edge of a soft blanket. Her body didn't shake, her stomach didn't scream. Alira opened her eyes next, still alert, but not in panic, for once. There was no shouting, no fear, no stepfather's angry voice in the air. They were in the shelter. The walls were still cracked, the roof patched with metal sheets, but it held. A small fire pit glowed with low heat, and beside it, in a metal bowl, sat 2 cooked root vegetables. Wrapped in leaves, still warm, Linny gasped. "He came back." Alira nodded slowly. "And he cooked." They sat close to the fire, eating the food slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear if they rushed. Linny licked her fingers. "I forgot what warm food tasted like." Alira didn't answer, but her eyes were softer now, not sharp like blades, but quiet like rain. Later that morning, they heard footsteps outside the shelter. Both girls tensed, but a calm voice called out, "It's Jalen. I have water and more wood." Alira peeked out the door, her body still ready to run, but it was him, the same human carrying a small jug and some firewood in his arms. He saw her and smiled. "You stayed." She nodded once, unsure what else to say. Jalen entered slowly, placing the wood near the fire, and poured clean water into 2 small cups, handing them to the girls without a word. Linny took hers with both hands and drank quickly, then giggled. "It's cold and good." Alira sipped hers carefully, her eyes still studying him. He didn't push them, didn't ask questions. He just sat on a wooden crate and looked at the fire, letting the silence fill the room. After a while, he said, "I used to be like you, hungry, forgotten, angry at everything." The girls didn't speak. He continued, "Someone helped me once, so now I do the same when I can." Linny asked, "Where is that person now?" Jalen's face changed, a shadow in his eyes. "Gone," he said quietly. "But I remember." Alira finally spoke. "People don't help without a reason." Jalen looked at her and nodded. "That's true, most don't." She tilted her head. "So why you?" He smiled slightly. "Because I remember what it feels like when no one does." He stood up, dusted off his coat, and walked to the door. "I'll come by later if you need anything." Then he paused, turned back, and added, If you want, I can teach you to make a fire or cook or fix things. You don't have to say yes now." He left without waiting for an answer. The girls sat quietly for a long time. The fire crackled gently. The shelter no longer felt like just four walls. It felt like a place that could hold peace. That afternoon, they stepped outside. The air was crisp, but not freezing. Jalen was not far, working on repairing a water pipe that fed into nearby homes. He saw them, gave a simple nod, then kept working. Linny walked closer, curious. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the tools. Jalen handed her a small wrench. "Want to help?" She looked up at Alira, who gave a slow nod. For the next hour, Jalen showed them how to twist the pipe rings, how to seal leaks with melted resin, and how to listen for the sound of clean water flowing. The girls listened closely, their hands unsure but willing. At one point, Linny laughed when water splashed her face. Jalen chuckled too. "That means it worked." Alira asked, "Why do you fix things for this town even if no one helps you?" Jalen replied, "Because maybe one day someone else will learn to help too." The day passed in simple tasks, but every moment built something invisible. Trust. By sunset, they had returned to the shelter with more wood, a pan, and even a small lantern that glowed softly. Jalen handed them another wrapped meal. "Tomorrow I'll teach you how to make this." He looked at them kindly. "You're not just survivors now, you're learners too." That night, under the roof of the shelter, the girls felt something they hadn't known in years. Belonging. Linny curled up in her blanket, whispering, "I like him." Alira stared at the ceiling, her voice quiet. "Me too. But what if he leaves like the others?" Linny hugged her sister tight. "What if he doesn't?" Alira didn't answer, but she didn't push the hope away either. Outside, Jalen sat alone by a small fire. Watching the stars above the broken town, he had nothing of his own, no riches, no home. But when he heard the faint sound of laughter coming from the shelter, he smiled. Because sometimes, warmth doesn't come from the fire. It comes from being needed. The days passed slowly, but not painfully. Inside the old shelter, the girls began to laugh again. Their cheeks grew fuller, their eyes brighter. The darkness inside their hearts began to fade. Jalen returned every morning with supplies, sometimes tools, sometimes food, sometimes just stories from other towns he had visited. Alira had learned to fix a loose wall panel with her own hands. Linny had helped Jalen start a fire all by herself. For the first time, they were not just surviving. They were learning, healing. One morning, Linny made a small drawing with charcoal on the wall. It showed the three of them sitting beside a fire, smiling. Jalen laughed when he saw it. "You made me look tall," Linny giggled. "That's because you are tall." Alira sat in the corner, watching them. She still carried the fear inside her, like a stone hidden deep in water. It didn't always show, but it was there. She trusted Jalen, but a part of her whispered, "Don't forget what happened last time you felt safe." Later that day, Jalen had to leave for a few hours. He said he needed to collect more supplies from the edge of the zone. "Keep the door locked until I return," he told them, his voice calm but serious. "Don't answer unless it's me." The girls nodded. Linny waved as he walked away. Then the door closed, and the silence returned, but it no longer felt cold. It felt like waiting. But as the sun moved slowly through the sky, heavy steps returned. Not soft, not familiar, but harsh and angry. Linny peeked through a small crack in the wall and gasped. "It's him." She whispered, her voice frozen in fear. Their stepfather stood outside the shelter, his coat torn, his face wild. He looked around like a hunter, sniffing the air. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "You little thieves, you ran from me, but you belong to me." Alira pulled Linny back from the wall, her voice tight. "Stay quiet." But the door rattled, a heavy slam, again and again. "Open up now," the stepfather roared, "or I'll tear this place apart." Alira grabbed the heavy wrench Jalen had left behind. Her hands shook, but her eyes were steady. Linny clung to her arm, whispering, "What if he breaks in?" The door cracked slightly. Wood splintered. Under pressure, Alira stood between the door and her sister, gripping the wrench tighter. I won't let him take us, she said. Not this time. Then a new sound. Footsteps running, boots slamming against the dirt road. A voice shouted firm and loud, "Step away from the door." It was Jalen. He had returned. The stepfather turned around, snarling, "Who are you? This is my business." Jalen didn't stop. He marched forward, his coat open, his arms ready. "They're not yours," he said, voice low but filled with fire. "You left them, you beat them, and now you want them back. Why? So you can break them again." "They're mine by blood," the stepfather growled. "You have no right." Jalen stepped between the man and the door. "I don't need blood." "To protect what's right," he said. "And they're not going anywhere with you." Inside the shelter, Linny clutched Alira's sleeve. "He came back," she whispered. Eyes wide, Alira nodded. Eyes wet, heart racing. Outside, the stepfather raised his arm to strike, but Jalen caught it mid-air. With a swift motion, he pushed the man back. "This is your last warning," Jalen said. "Leave now, and never return." The stepfather stumbled, but still shouted, "You'll regret this, human. They're nothing but trouble, you'll see." Then, like the coward he truly was, he turned and ran into the shadows, spitting curses as he vanished. Jalen stood still for a long moment, breathing heavy, fists clenched. Then slowly he turned and knocked gently on the door. "It's me," he said softly. The door opened. Alira stood there, still holding the wrench. She looked up at him, eyes full of storm and silence. "You fought him," she said, voice trembling. "I told you I'd protect you," Jalen replied. "And I meant it." Linny ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're not like him," she whispered. "You're not like anyone," Jalen gently placed a hand on her head, then looked at Alira. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. "Not while I'm here." Alira lowered the wrench. Her arms dropped, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to cry in front of someone who wouldn't use it against her. She stepped forward and leaned her head against Jalen's arm, just for a second. Not much, but enough. Inside the shelter, the fire was still burning, the warmth still there, but now it wasn't just firewood that made it glow. It was the presence of someone who stood, not for power but for love, someone who didn't need to be their father by blood, because in every way that mattered, he already was. The next morning, the town felt different. The air was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind that warned of something coming, something heavy, something watching from the shadows. Inside the shelter, Jalen sat beside the fire, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of water. Across from him, Alira sharpened a piece of metal into a small tool. Linny sat curled near the blankets, drawing small shapes in the dust with her finger. They didn't speak much, but there was a new closeness between them, a quiet understanding. Jalen had defended them, not with words but with action. Still, Alira's eyes were sharp. She hadn't forgotten the stepfather's warning. "He'll come back," she whispered. "With others, maybe," Jalen nodded slowly. "Maybe so. But we won't hide," he added, his voice steady. "Not anymore." That afternoon, Jalen took them outside to the center of the ruins. It was where old machines once stood, where vendors once sold fruit and spices and water. Now it was empty, broken walls and rusted metal scattered across the ground. Jalen started clearing debris, building a wall with stacked stones. Alira frowned. "What are you doing?" "Making a line," he said. "One they'll have to cross if they try to take you again." The girls helped, lifting what they could, arranging what Jalen showed them. It wasn't a strong wall, but it was a message. This place was no longer abandoned. By evening, some of the townsfolk had gathered nearby. Curious eyes watched from behind corners and broken windows. Whispers moved like wind. "That's the human. The one who fought the drunk alien. He's building something." Jalen saw them but said nothing. He stood tall with a shovel in hand and dirt on. His coat, he wasn't building just a wall. He was making a stand. Later that night, while the girls rested, Jalen stepped outside the shelter alone. The stars above were dim through the smoke, but he looked at them anyway. In his pocket was an old photo, worn and faded. It showed a woman and a child. His past, his loss, his reason. He heard footsteps behind him, light and cautious. It was Alira. She stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes looking far. "You don't have to do all this," she said. "We're not your responsibility." Jalen looked at her gently. "Maybe not. But I choose to be here," he said. "I choose to protect what's right." Alira didn't speak for a while, then she asked, "Why?" Jalen took a deep breath. "When I lost my family," he said, "I stopped living for a while. But then I realized, if I can give someone else what I lost, even just a little, then maybe I'm still useful." Alira looked down at her hands. "We're not easy," she whispered. "We're broken." Jalen knelt and picked up a small stone, holding it out to her. "This stone is broken," he said, "but it still fits in a wall. And sometimes the broken pieces are the strongest part." She stared at him, unsure what to say, but her walls were thinner now, not gone, but not as tall as before. The next morning, the warning came. A boy from the town ran up to the shelter, panting. "They're coming," he cried. "Your stepfather and some others, they're angry. They say you're stealing property." Alira and Linny froze. "But—" Jalen stood calmly. "Let them come," he said. He stood at the wall he had built. Facing the open street, the girls stood behind him, silent but watching. Soon the group arrived. The stepfather led them, his face twisted with pride and anger. 5 others were with him, rough men with sharp weapons and cruel eyes. "You think you can hide them here forever?" the stepfather shouted. "They belong to me." Jalen raised his voice, not with hate but with power. "They are not objects. They are children," the crowd behind the stepfather muttered, uncertain now. They hadn't expected resistance. "These girls are under my protection," Jalen continued. "If you try to take them, you'll have to go through me." The stepfather stepped forward. "Then I'll do just that." But something unexpected happened. From the sides of the street, more townsfolk appeared. Not many, just a few at first, then more. Old men, quiet women, even some young workers with tools in hand. They stood beside the broken buildings and watched, not speaking, just standing. Jalen didn't look back, but he knew. He wasn't alone anymore. The stepfather looked around, saw the eyes watching, saw that his power was fading. He cursed under his breath and spat on the ground. "This isn't over," he growled, then turned and walked away. His followers unsure, slow and silent. When they were gone, Jalen let out a breath. Linny ran to him and hugged his leg. "You didn't move," she whispered. "You didn't let them take us." Alira looked at him, and for the first time, her eyes didn't just carry fear. They carried trust. He had taken a stand, not just with fists, but with heart. And in doing so, he gave them something they never had before. The feeling of being worth fighting for. The danger had passed for now, but inside the shelter, the air remained still. Linny stared at the glowing embers of the fire while Alira sat near the wall. Sharpening a tool in silence, Jalen moved quietly as he fixed a broken window with old metal sheets. But even his movements felt heavier than before. They had won a battle. But deep down, they all knew. Peace in this world was fragile. That night, thunder rolled in the distance. Clouds gathered above the ruined town. A storm was coming, not just from the sky, but from the cracks still left in their hearts. Jalen placed warm bowls of food in front of the girls, a stew made from wild root and dry meat. Linny smiled and took her first bite. "It's really good." Alira ate slowly, watching him. "You're tired," she said quietly, noticing the lines on his face. Jalen nodded. "A little, but I'd do it again." After the meal, they sat together under the soft light of the small lantern. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire cracked gently, filling the shelter with flickers of light. Linny pulled her blanket around her and whispered, "Can we sleep close to the fire tonight?" "Of course," Jalen replied, gently placing another log in the pit. But as the storm rumbled louder, Alira's eyes stared wide into the darkness. Her thoughts returned to old memories. Nights when thunder meant fists, when lightning flashed just before pain. She curled her knees close to her chest, trying to fight the shaking Jalen noticed and sat beside her. "You're safe now," he said. "It's just a storm." She nodded but didn't speak. Linny, half asleep, mumbled from her blanket, "He's not coming back, right?" "No," Jalen answered gently. "Not while I'm here." As the night deepened, sleep came slowly. Jalen stayed awake, listening to every sound, ready for anything. He had no weapon in his hand, but his heart was firm. In the middle of the night, Alira stirred, her breathing sharp. She sat up quickly, eyes wild, whispering, "No, please, don't." Jalen rushed to her side, placing a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, it's not real, it was a dream." Alira looked at him, eyes wet. She hadn't cried in front of anyone since her mother's death. But now the tears came fast, silent but heavy. Jalen didn't speak. He just sat there, holding her hand, waiting. "I was back in that house," she whispered. "He was yelling, and I couldn't move." Jalen gently wiped her tears with a cloth. "You're not there anymore," he said. "You're here, with me, with Linny, and no one can touch you now." She nodded, breathing slower. "I'm sorry," she said, ashamed. Jalen shook his head. "You never have to say sorry for being scared. Brave doesn't mean never afraid," he added. "Brave means still standing, even with fear in your chest." For the rest of the night, Alira didn't return to her blanket. She sat beside Jalen, head resting on his arm. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel small without shame. And Jalen didn't move, didn't flinch. He let her stay. When morning came, the storm had passed, the clouds broke apart, and golden light slipped through the holes in the ceiling. Linny stretched and yawned, blinking at the sight of her sister leaning on Jalen's arm. She smiled. "Looks like you two had a better sleep than me." Alira blushed slightly but didn't pull away. Jalen smiled softly. "You snored, by the way," he teased Linny. Linny giggled and threw a small pillow at him. The laughter felt new, but good. It filled the shelter with something brighter than fire, something like hope. Later that day, they cleaned the shelter together. Linny swept the floor with a handmade broom. Alira patched the walls, and Jalen repaired a broken shelf. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. A few people from the town passed by, watching. From a distance, one woman placed a small fruit basket at the door, then walked away silently. A boy dropped off extra blankets. Slowly, word was spreading. The human had done what no one else dared, and maybe, just maybe, people were ready to believe again. That evening, Jalen gave the girls 2 small badges made from carved stone. On each badge, he had scratched a symbol, 3 dots in a circle. "This means unity," he said. "Where I come from, it means we belong to each other. You're not alone anymore." Linny wore hers proudly around her neck. Alira stared at hers for a long moment, then tied it around her wrist. She looked up at Jalen and said quietly, "We're not broken anymore." He smiled. "You never were." That night, as the stars returned and the fire warmed their shelter once again, there was no fear, only quiet hearts, soft breathing, and the peaceful sound of a family being born, not by blood, but by trust, and by the choice to stay.